Welcome to That Sounds Terrific in the 585. Join hosts Nick Koziel and Christine Green as they spotlight the incredible leaders, visionaries, and innovators shaping Rochester and the 585 community. From transformative stories to big ideas, we celebrate the people making our community a better place to live, work, and thrive. So sit back, relax, and listen to what makes the 585 sound terrific.
Hello, welcome to That Sounds Terrific in the 585 with Nick Koziel and Christine Green. And today we have Deena Viviani on the podcast. Hello, Deena.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to have you on the show. Nick and I have been talking about this for a while. Nick, do you want to add anything before we jump into questions?
Oh man, I'm just excited. And thanks for doing the intros now. I love it. I love not having to do all the hard lifting intros of
Arlen.
guests, mispronouncing names. Dina's easy though. So we're
Yeah.
so pleased to have you on the show, Dina. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Uh,
So why don't you
so
shoot off the first question, Christine?
let's go for it.
Yeah.
Deena, you are a children's librarian at the Brighton, New York Library, correct?
Yes. Brighton Memorial Library. I'm technically the young adult services librarian, but I do
Okay.
work in the Children's Center a few days a week. And I work with all ages of patrons really between the two desks. But yeah, my focus is on really tweens and teens.
Tell us how long you've been in this position and have you worked in libraries other than the one in Brighton?
Yeah, so I got my degree, my master's degree in 2004 in library science from University of Buffalo. And before that, all through college and the end of high school, I actually worked at the Parma Public Library. And I was first a page there in high school where I shelved books, helped with some of the kids' programs, things like that. And then I moved on to page processor, we called it. So I helped process materials. And it's a smaller library than here at Brighton. It's a great library. They're just doing some renovations right now. It's in Hilton, New York, where I grew up. And then eventually I just started like answering questions at the desk and things like that. But it's not really as divided up by different desks as it is here. So you kind of become like a jack of all trades
Mhm.
when you work at a smaller library, but it was really fun. Then I had to get a real grown-up job after I graduated from high school because I needed money and health insurance and all that stuff. So I worked for a legal publishing company for I was about 6 months in when I was like, I do not want to work in an office. I want to work in a library. So I went back, got my master's degree, and then, yeah, was hired here in February of 2008 here at Brighton.
That's awesome. It's awesome. So Christine doesn't know this about me, but I have library experience.
Oh, yeah.
So my first job was in a library. Again, children's page, did the summer reading program, and then later on moved over. My mom worked in a library too, so I moved over to that library in Long Island, Cold Spring Harbor area. And that was kind of cool because I sort of helped with the transition to a brand new built like state-of-the-art library that was also an environmental
Ooh.
center, which was kind of exciting.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so
Yeah,
kind of
that's
in your
cool.
footsteps in a way,
Yeah.
and I got head page. I was in charge of all the pages. Um, and then I decided to go to college and do something else. But the librarian there that was convinced I was going to come back and be a librarian, but I haven't done it yet. So there's still time.
Still
Yeah, there's
time.
still time.
But yeah.
And Dina, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because I am such a fan. Well, there's multiple reasons, but one of them is I'm such a fan of libraries. And I think sometimes when we talk about people who are terrific or doing really big things, we think of the mayor and the politicians, and we think of people running these really big companies. And the reality is that terrific people are doing things at every level. And for me, young people and reading are one of the things that makes great, terrific leaders in the community. How, why specifically young adult and children? I know you said you're a little jack of all trades, you know a lot about it,
Hmm.
but what is it about particularly young people's books, because, and I'll talk about this soon, about the writing you do for us, but you are extremely knowledgeable about current books and what kids are reading right now.
Yeah, so I started, it was actually during grad school, or maybe it was between undergrad and grad school. And I was like, oh, I have time to read what I want again. And I was like, what has really changed in kid lit and teen lit since I was that age? And it had exploded. Like Harry Potter came out in like 1996, and then it was like early 2000s when Twilight came out. And it was just this huge explosion in kidlit because companies had money again from these products, but also just from grabbing in kids and teen readers. So they could spend more money on trying new authors, new debuts. And it just grew and grew. And I started reading this again. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I want to get these books in kids and teen readers' hands. And then as I started reading more, I was like, well, now I want to write a young adult novel. So I started writing. And as I was writing, I got involved in RACWI, which is Rochester Area Children's Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI, which is Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, which is the international group. And I was bombarded with new books coming in all the time. And I was like, I need to read all of these. It was also good to keep an eye on the market because I was like, if I want my books to be marketable, if I want what I'm writing to be sellable or an agent to see them. So I wanted to know for that reason too. But then it's also just like, we get these boxes of books in the library from our distributor, and you're just like, oh my gosh, so many new pretty books. And we all, you're looking at, you have to not take them all home because you need to save some for the patrons. But there's so many great titles coming out. My personal goal since before I had a kid 8 years ago, I read even more than I do now. But now my goal is 10 books a month. That does not include picture books. Picture books are extra. So middle grade novels, graphic novels, young adult novels, adult work, and nonfiction too. So 10 a month is my goal. And according to Goodreads, I am on track. It's October when we're recording this, and I am over 90 books. So I need to reach 100 this year by the end of the month. So I just keep going and just keep going. Most of them are new books that come out because I do want to be relevant in what I'm recommending as teen services and working with middle schoolers too, or just working in the children's center with families of all ages. I want to be able to give them new things that they haven't seen before. There's always the tried and true, but a lot of people already know Mo Willems and Elephant and Piggy and The Pigeon, which I would always recommend. But I'm like, what haven't they read that might be similar so that they can leave with a nice big pile of books? And then also, that goes into reviews. I write reviews not just for 585 Kids and 585 Magazine, but also for the RACWI group. So they have a newsletter. I do that. Voices of Youth Advocacy. It was Voya, used to be a review journal, and I would write reviews for that magazine before they folded around COVID. So it's just always been kind of my thing. And part of it too comes to like being a writer when I'm trying to pitch new ideas or books or magazine articles. I want to make it concise. So for as much as I can talk, I want my writing to be very concise. So I really try to get like the essence of a book down in 1 or 2 sentences to make that the summary for the reviews. And then a little bit of why I liked it or what wasn't great about it. And then if there is some extra tidbit about the author to pull in, I like to have that too. So reading new books and then making myself post them all on my Goodreads, my private Goodreads, but then I can pull from that to provide reviews for area schools, families, and then for review publications.
Wow. It doesn't sound like you're doing really anything. So,
No.
but I mean, actually,
lazy.
in all seriousness, we probably should get off this podcast pretty quick so you can get back to reading so you can reach your
I
goal.
know, 100 by the end of the month.
100. I know it's crazy. I'll be lucky to read 100 in 10 years. But so really, we gotta get to the serious question, okay? Very serious question here. Okay. Were you Team Edward or Team Jacob?
I read that full series. I loved every book, even though there were faults with them.
Mhm.
But I don't really know that I was team either.
Mhm.
But what I loved about the books was Stephanie Meyer nailed teen girl angst
Mhm.
and
And she did.
Mhm.
pining for these boys and can't focus on anything. She nailed it. I mean, I'm probably Team Edward, even though I wasn't a big Robert Pattinson fan. The movies didn't really do it for me.
Yeah.
Probably Team Edward seems maybe less like of a gross smell than a werewolf. Possibly, maybe smells like decaying flesh. I'm not sure if you're Edward, but
No,
I read him because she
like
nailed teen girl angst in
Yeah.
high school.
she knows how to write a page turner. I'll give
Yeah.
her that. And
Yes.
I'm Team Charlie.
I love Charlie.
Yeah.
Charlie.
So
Yeah.
clueless.
So clueless. Has no
In his
idea what's going
flannel.
on.
Also, the way that most teen girls see their fathers, right?
Of course.
Very well, right.
Yeah.
No, but did you happen to read, I'm totally going off on a tangent here, but like The Short Life of Bree Tanner, did you read that?
I skipped it.
I thought that was really good.
I've skipped everything. I read the first 4 and I've skipped everything since.
Yeah, because she rewrote, and I read that too, rewrote from the other perspective as well, and I thought that was interesting. It was
Good.
hard to get through. But anyways, I digress quite a bit. There was so much more in your answer of all these things, these terrific things that you're doing to make not only teens and young adults more aware, but also parents more aware of what's good for children and young teens to be reading. And like, how did you get involved with all these different things? Was it like a waterfall? Like you just started doing it all, or like what led to all these things that you're
Yeah,
doing?
that is a good question. I think um that is a good question. So my history with 585 Kids actually started way back with Genesee Valley Parent Magazine.
Mhm.
So a woman who is a friend and who was a critique partner for years and is also a member of RACWE, she was friends with the editor Barbara, I think it was Barbara, of Genesee
Barbara
Valley.
Melnick, yeah.
Yes, of that magazine. And she had actually written an article for them on something not book related. And she told me, she's like, Deena, I know you read a million books, and I know that Barbara and her daughter are looking for someone to write the Book Nook column there. Because at that time, Barbara's daughter was writing like almost everything and was a little bit stretched thin. So she's like, so I thought of you. And at the time, I think I was doing reviews for Voya and I think the RACWE newsletter probably at the time. And I was like, oh, that'd be awesome. Sure. So I, was introduced to them, and that was kind of how it started. So, I mean, really, I don't even know what year that was anymore that I started writing for Genesee Valley Parent, and then bought by Rock Parent, and then 585. So I just kind of transitioned through, and nobody got rid of me. Thanks, Christine. They kept me on and were like, yeah, keep doing these. We keep doing these. I'm like, sure. I'm reading anyway. And if it's another way for me to be able to share the material, and this wasn't really part of your question, but I always have to segue into this, like, Kidlit is doing such a good job of diversifying authors, characters, illustrators, stories in terms of like anything like we talk about, like BIPOC. They are doing such a good job, birth
Yeah.
through teen. Adult, not so much less.
Isn't that interesting?
When you look at bestseller list, New York Times bestseller list, for example, for adult, you'll see the same best-selling authors on there over and over, and a lot of them are white men. Sorry, Nick, I'm not.
It's
This is
okay.
not disparaging, but just looking
I'm
in
not
terms
one
of
of them.
diversity, you're not one of them. You're not on the bestseller. New York
I'm not
Times
on the bestseller list. I am
Yeah.
a white male, but I am not on any bestsellers list.
And there's nothing wrong with them, but when James Patterson's books, take up like half the list, then that's what people read, and it just perpetuates the same type of reading. The Kidlit lists now are amazing, like at least half, which is a huge growth since I've been a librarian, are by, I'd say, BIPOC or, LGBTQIA authors about different characters. And I really want to make sure that kids and parents can see that this is all out there, and that there is, because if you're my age and you did not grow up with that diversity in the literature you were reading, you might not even realize it's out there and might not think it's relevant to your kids or, whatever. So I want to make sure that a lot of these titles get out there more than just even is on the bestseller list so that readers can see themselves, the whole windows versus mirrors, that you want both. You want to be able to identify with characters and you want to be able to learn about people different than yourself.
I love that idea of mirrors and windows. I hadn't heard that analogy before.
It's a big Kidlit librarian thing and Kidlit writer thing, but it's true. That's two of the main reasons kids read.
Yeah. And I think, one of the reasons I love the library and I love particularly children's and young adult librarians like yourself is that you see this kind of, you're very much a witness to the transition of what's constantly new. And yes, we can do that with adult books and that's important and you do that, but to really see how our kids are changing in terms of what they want, what parents are wanting. And one of the things that I really appreciate is this idea that literacy, and I was wondering if you could address this, literacy for young people can come in many forms and they can find those different forms at the library. Talk a little bit about the different ways literacy can look for a young person and how have access to those at our free libraries.
That is a great one too, because we always want to make sure as librarians and hopefully educators think this too, that listening to a book is reading. Mm-hmm. Reading a comic or a graphic novel is reading. Reading anything through any form is reading. Like if a person cannot hear, but can read, visually, great. If a person cannot see, but can read through their ears, fine. You wouldn't say that that person cannot read simply because they are taking stories in a different way. And I think that's really important for people to know. Audiobooks, another huge game changer for Kidlit particularly. We're kind of phasing out of books on CD since less cars come with CD players now. But our library has playaways for all ages, which are little MP3 players. You pop in a AAA battery and you pop in your headphones and you're good to go. You can use a jack to also play those in your car. What I also like about them is you can speed them up because people make fun of me. I listen to my books at 2.0 speed.
No.
Yeah, 2.0. Sometimes I have to start at 1.5, then I get a feel for the reader, and then it's got to be 2.0 because I don't have 9 hours to listen to a book if I can do it in 4.5, right? I got goals to meet here. Everyone laughs at me. They're like, are you listening to it? Yeah, I get it. I can tell you what's happened. Then we have, there's Wonder Books, which are made by Playway, and Vox Books is another brand, and they are books. So like we used to have like the book with the cassette or the book with the CD. Now it's the book with the MP3 player built in. So we've got those. They just started making those for young adult books. They were at first just for kids and middle grade. Now we've got them for teens. They're just starting to release some adult titles that way, which is great. So all of that totally legit. And some of the things that I've read in terms of the research of it is by listening to books, you learn about cadence and pronunciation. And that is huge to understanding the way something is read in addition to just the words on a page. So that can provide that part of literacy for you, the understanding part. The words on a page, of course, always great for word recognition. That works too. So the two in conjunction, particularly for anyone who might be a struggling reader, to have the book with the audio is just huge. They're super popular. And in our children's room, like almost every Wonder book was checked out all summer while families were on vacations. So that was really great. And then, of course, we've got, our streaming services here at Brighton. Well, all of Monroe County Library System has access to the Overdrive catalog through the Libby app. A bunch of libraries, including Brighton. We also have the Hoopla app, which is very similar, just different checkouts and different restrictions on numbers and how you can check things out. But the same idea, and it's a big deal. And even I was like a skeptic of comics on audiobook. until I listened to a couple, and they kind of read like a podcast because, or like an old radio show or something, because it'll have the sound effects of like the student walking across the floor and the door opening and closing before they talk to their teacher in the classroom. Things like that that I didn't realize were in there. And now I see why those win, awards for audiobooks too. So even a comic you can do that way. And comics have a lot of words. This is sort of segueing into why I want to make sure these are huge. My daughter, she is in third grade, and she just started getting into the Raina Telgemeier books, Smile, Sisters, Drama, Guts, and they're just super appealing. They're great stories. They're relatable. And there are a lot of words in these books. Like anyone who doesn't pick them up and just thinks it's reading like one Garfield comic strip. It's like, no, it's like reading like 200 Garfield comic strips in a row with one continuous story. So again, it's the understanding, the comprehension part of literacy, not just, words on a page.
Yeah, I mean, kind of
Amazing.
going back to like before there was words, right? Stories were told, audibly, and you were retelling them and learning to retell them.
Right.
And like your cadence that you were talking about is important because like that's where sort of the drama came from. Like, you started to
Yes.
make your own sound effects and big picture motions and things like that. You see like Spotify, for instance, is mostly auditory, but they started, handling video. And now they're to the point where I'll listen to them sometimes and there's a commercial on. I'm in my car. I can't see
Right.
what they're doing. And it takes like good 25 seconds in before I realize, oh, this is a commercial about Nissan. Like I didn't
It's
even know there was a car.
right.
There's people
Right.
clapping. There's this like, native kind of music from Africa. And I'm like, don't know what's happening. This is interesting. And then they
It's
finally at
true.
the very end say something about Nissan. But I guess the question that I was going to ask with going off on my tangent is this like, you know, um, how do you see, the future of reading? Like we've broken back into audio, right? Where do you see it going? Is there a trend that you're seeing in that, young adult books are taking us that will maybe bleed into adult books?
Yeah, it's a good question. There is some new other types of storytelling technology coming out. A lot of it really targets to kids, and I don't know how much staying power they'll have. There's like, for example, Tony's you may have heard of, and then there's something else that's similar to them. And there's basically like it's a box, and the box has a speaker and the buttons on it. And then you have a little card or a character that you insert, and that's like your computer chip. And then that will tell stories, or you can sometimes record music onto it and it will play music. So it's almost like making your reading device looking like a toy.
Mhm.
And in some ways, it's like reverting back to having a tangible device just for listening. So, like when we all had radios and stereos taking up big portions of our bedrooms or living rooms. But then that kind of all went away. And we're just like, I'm just going to Bluetooth this from my phone. Or I'm just going to have we've got the Google Home, just have it go from there. It's almost like they're slowly bringing back the
Mhm.
device that is just for that. So I don't know, will it expand again? Records are like sort of still coming back again, not to the extent, and probably never to the extent they were, but there are some libraries that loan them again.
Mhm.
So I don't know if it'll be a cycle of like what's old is new again, that people will want some of the recording nuances that aren't quite so polished when you have a digital track, that when
Yeah.
you listen to a record or a cassette or even a CD, that you can hear like the device as well as the song. So I don't really know. That's a good question, but we are seeing some changes, and I do think that whatever technology changes in people's cars is going to dictate the types of audiobooks that adults might switch to. If
Mhm.
Bluetooth sticks around and everyone's got their phone, I can see that being the predominant way to go on for a while. But there are still a lot of people who want a device that they know is just there in their car if they need to read.
Yeah, my young son wants a boombox, and it's just funny, but he's a little bit of an old soul, so I don't know if that is the trend. But yeah, he's like enamored with the whole idea of getting a like a true boombox, and he likes our CDs. I used to have a record player, don't have record anymore, but I too totally see that coming back a little bit and
Yeah.
having some staying power. So, but the other show that I produced that it's called That Sounds Terrifying, and there is more of that radio effect to that show sometimes. And I'm gonna actually have to throw some people walking up the steps or something like that when you were
Right.
talking in this
Creepy
show.
stairs.
So, but I feel like I'm hogging the interview here, Christine. So like
No,
I'll
no,
let you
no.
jump in.
So what I wanted to ask you too, Deena, is so you work with a lot of people in the community. So I have a couple of questions, but this is the first one. You come across a lot of people in the community in terms of patrons and readers, but also the authors. Tell me a little bit. We talked to Sarah Mead last week
Hmm.
and Brackway, and tell us a little bit how you've been able to connect, particularly with writing for 585, um, with local authors of all genres, from the little kids
Yeah.
to adults. Tell us what that is like to have that perspective, because that is different than many other people who work in libraries, is that you've kind of expanded outside of the library, right, to write for these magazines for connecting with the community. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the since my start was really with Kidlit, joining Rackway was like huge for making connections and meeting people. So like Hugo Jones, for example, she's got her second picture book is coming out. She's an illustrator. Linda Sue Park is part of that group. She lives in Brighton, Newbery Award-winning author. Vivian Vandeveld, she's won oh my gosh, the spooky one, Poe, Edgar Awards.
Yes, the spooky one.
And then just all these other authors who have become part of that group, writing for kids through teens. So I think that is where I kind of got my confidence to reach out to authors and chat with them. Then through the years, when there was a Greater Rochester Teen Book Festival, and now through Greater Rochester Youth Read, we call it, from the librarian point of view, I would interact with these authors who weren't from Rochester. So, I didn't really know them. And then it was like, okay, branching out. And then you just start realizing that we look at these people as like these amazing, famous creators because we love books and we love libraries and all that. And then you talk to them, you're like, all right, they're actually cool people too. Okay, I don't have to be so scared or starstruck. So I gained my confidence more through planning events and working at author events through Kidlit. So then, yeah, when Christine was like, do you want to write for the Grown Up magazine? I'm like, only if it's about books. I don't know anything else for this fancy magazine. What do I do? And we talked about like, okay, local authors and reviewing their books. And I was like, all right, there's the handful I know. But Christine's like, oh, well, have you heard of this, or this person? And I was like, oh, no, I haven't. So I looked them up. I went through older issues of 585 magazine. I found different author interviews that you had done, or some other freelancers. And I kind of went through a little bit of like a aha moment of like just how big, particularly adult writers, which is not as racy as it sounds. We're just adult
I know
versus
it does
kidlit,
sound
the
kind of
adult
like,
writers. Because I really wasn't tuned into that world. I was so focused on teen and children's work, for most of my career. So then I'm like, oh my gosh, there's local authors everywhere in the 585, and it's amazing. And some are self-published, some are small press published, some are comic artists, some are nonfiction, some are research books, some are, traditionally big five publisher. And no matter who I'd reach out to see if they would give me some little tidbits for their little bio paragraph, they're just like so happy that you like read their book, and thanks for reaching out. And oh yeah, and I mean, now it seems kind of obvious because of course, they're writers, they're readers, so of course they would like this local, magazine that promotes writing and reading, to include them. But it is kind of intimidating at first when you're introducing yourself without that much under your belt with the adult lit world. But really, everyone's just been like so friendly. The people who I can't get a reply from on time, usually it's just because it's like a deadline thing and I try to start early enough. Then, I'll like scour the internet and find information that is on there and put something together. And even then, I'm like impressed with how much they're sharing about themselves online. Like I can find quite a bit of stuff out there to put a complete picture together. But even if I didn't get material from them in time and they see it, they're thankful and grateful for the reviews.
Well, we are thankful and grateful for the reviews. I get nothing but positive feedback on all of it. And
Great.
Nick, if you don't mind, I have another question. I wanted
don't
to
mind.
ask about you personally as a writer yourself. I had the privilege of reading it's in current early stage, but we'll get there, a children's book. That is amazing. And when I say get there, I mean someone's going to pick it up and publish it.
Thank
Tell
you.
us a little bit about I was so impressed about this book, if you want,
Yeah,
and
sure.
your other personal writing projects.
Yeah, so I do a lot of, well, I should say, so I was writing young adult novels and middle grade novels for years. Then I had my daughter, and I was like, my brain was not functioning in novel length format anymore. So I started dabbling in picture books, which of course I was reading more of when she was a small child. And then I started reading more kidlit magazines, like the Crickets and the Highlights. So I was like, well, I would be like rocking her to sleep or something. I could, in my head, write a poem and then just keep editing it and revising it sort of just in my head because it was short enough. So I sold like during that time I sold a short story to Highlights High Five that came out I think it was last year. Came out last year. Was it last year? No, that was, geez, see, now I'm getting all confused. Last year's a different one. This one was like a few years ago. And I also had a nonfiction article that came out in Crickett's Muse magazine. And then my most recent was a short nonfiction piece on fingerprints that came out with Crickett's Spider magazine. So that was the one that came out this past year. So I'm still submitting and getting lots of rejections on those, but there's so many ideas. And then I'm like, oh, I want to develop this into a picture book, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. So one of the ideas that I'd come up with, because there are so many amazing picture book biographies out now. Like that's how I learn about people all the time now is picture book biographies. I was like, who I have never seen a picture book biography on, but I know people would want to learn about is Margaret Woodbury Strong. Yes. So I went, this was a couple years ago. I spent a number of days at the library in the Strong Museum, not like their public library, but their archival library.
And look, I'm sorry, let me interrupt for 1 second
Yeah.
because we do have listeners that aren't in the 585.
Oh,
So we're talking
yes.
about the 58. Can you tell the listeners first what Strong Museum is, and then we can continue on.
Yeah, the Strong Museum, it's really the Strong National Museum of Play. And they are the current owners of the Toy Hall of Fame. So every year, different toys are nominated to be in the Hall of Fame, and they make their picks. So they are the owners of that. They're the second largest children's museum in the United States. And they, have 500,000 people visit a year now, post COVID years again, where things are coming back. It's huge. It has the mini grocery store for the kids to go shopping. It's got this whole area that's like the fairy tale village where you can, climb through things and pick, Farmer Brown's vegetables and, all that type of stuff. They have for adults and older kids, they've got all these old school pinball machines, arcade games. So games too, toys and games, and dolls. So Margaret Woodbury Strong was the founder of this museum, and it did not open until after she had died in 1969. But basically, her fortune is what started this magazine, and her obsessive collection of dolls and just other stuff. So the first iteration of this amazing children's museum interactive museum was really just more of like more of the prim and proper, okay, come in and look around and learn about these artifacts. But I believe she would be amazed and love what it has become now. So I should have my manuscript printed out so I can get my quotes right. But really, she was a Rochester native. She lived most of her life in Rochester. Her wealthy parents one had a buggy whip company, the other were flour millers, and when they sold their businesses, they became even richer. She was the only child. So she inherited all their money, including the largest Eastman Kodak stock at the time. So they were just very, very wealthy, and she never had to work. She lived a life of privilege, but she was a lonely child, from what you can tell, and really was, sort of brought up in that, Victorian way, having been born just at the turn of the century, and didn't have a lot of kids around with her. She went on these worldwide vacations with her parents and was around adults all the time. But she started collecting on vacations. Her parents said, okay, you can buy some small things that you can fit in your bag to take with you. And so these became, sort of her entertainment, her friends, and her appreciation for dolls, toys, and games just, grew from there. So I should end by saying, so I have a picture book manuscript that I have written about Margaret Woodbury Strong, that I think tells a lot of people who go to her museum, like what its roots are from. Some of us who've lived here forever and went to that museum, the old school museum in the 80s with our parents, dragged there as a little kid, and we're looking at everything. It was called the Margaret Woodbury Strong Museum, so we know that. But kids today, Strong National Museum of Play, well, what's strong? Who is strong? And so just to add some perspective to this woman who created this thing.
That sounds like an amazing, amazing story that definitely needs to be told again.
Oh, I read it. It's so fun. It's so fun. And you can picture the pictures that should go with it. So are you submitting it places?
So I'd submitted it to a couple places, to a couple agents, and I had gotten like some good feedback, but was told it's like too niche for a national story, because it's like, yeah, it's a big national museum. It's a big children's museum, but it has such a Rochester focus. So I sent it to a small local publisher, and they're like, it's really not what we're doing right now, even though we really liked it. They weren't doing picture books right now. And I've sent it off to another local place. So we'll see what happens. I'm, open to small presses, or just to any way to get something together for it, but I'm not an illustrator. So I don't want to self-publish it just because of that. I've self-published 3 young adult novels in the past, and it was super fun to do, and I was, grateful to have done it. But for this one, I'm just like, I feel like I really need editorial guidance and an illustrator who has a solid background in picture books.
That's amazing. Wow. Like, if anyone's listening that is interested in this project, for sure, get in contact. We'll have her contact information in the show notes. So, but be on the lookout. I have some ideas for you. I'll share in the off the show. So
awesome.
But this is really, really cool. Like, I have to say, like, I knew this was gonna be great, but Christine's got to stop bringing like authors and creatives to my attention, because I am a dabbler, and like I'm like, I want to write a book again. I want to do this. I want to, like, next is gonna be like a musician. I'm gonna want to write a song, So,
exactly.
But you're so inspiring. Yeah, no, I am so inspired here about like just the things that you're doing in general, but like also the stuff that you're doing personally to kind of share your wealth of knowledge. I think that's part of reading. That's part of being, in the library. It's part of being a creative. It's like, it's time to share it with as many people as you can and inspire others.
Absolutely.
So, and then, like, one of the reasons that the show was pivoting to where we're featuring people in the 585 is because there are so many amazing artists, and like how Christine started the show off was perfect, because there's so many terrific people right here and now to share it, that I don't need to go outside of the neighborhood.
They really are.
It almost is absolutely. Like, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in the 585. I love it. So, I feel like the trolley is coming by and like making the ding ding sound, and yeah. So, um, I just I wanted to ask a little bit more about like, what other things that you're interested in doing and like to share with our audience.
Oh, let's see. What else? Well, it is fall, so it is time for my family to go get our pumpkins. We like to do some really good pumpkin carving this time of year. My daughter wants us this time to do Bluey and Bingo.
Oh,
We like to
neat.
do characters. We've done characters before from Team Umizoomi. That was a fun one. For anyone who remembers that show.
Mhm.
We've done some other characters. So I'm a very fall person. I love all of the spooky this and that. I'm getting ready to, oh yes, because this is October when we're recording this.
Mhm.
Um, and I love thrifting. I'm big into the Goodwill clearance bins. And we like to say here that anyone can look good for full price. Take someone special to look good for rock bottom prices.
Oh my
So
gosh.
we're all about the bins.
Every-
And it's a good excuse for me because then I make our
Love the
Halloween
bins.
costumes, the bins, the
Awesome.
Goodwill clearance
They're
bins.
so good. They're
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
good.
yeah, so good. So I'm working on I like my costumes to be a combination of like enough recognition, but still arts and crafts to be funny, like bad arts and crafts, because I'm not really that good at arts and crafts. So I'm going with Marty McFly. So I need to acquire still a Walkman, but I'm doing pretty good on the other part. So I'm working on that, like to do our dress up.
Love it.
Yeah, my husband is a musician. So if we can get out to see music, I like to do that. And yeah, we're taking my daughter to see during the pandemic when she was 3.5 at the time that everything sort of shut down. And as an activity, we'd just be like, okay, let's just take a bath. She'd be in there for like 2 hours and we would put on the Google Home music. And I can't remember exactly when it started. I think it was because she was also watching Trolls,
Mhm.
and there were some Trolls songs that were covers of the band Heart. She
Mhm.
became obsessed with the band Heart, right? So also very into 80s music myself. So we are taking her to see Heart. The concert was rescheduled for Buffalo in March. So we're going to see Heart in March. We just took her to
Art's
Imagine
coming in March.
Dragons.
Sorry,
Oh
I just
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
should probably go too.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it's going to be great. Last year we took her to see Peter Gabriel, so we're getting her in on all of
Oh,
our 80s music.
that's
So that's
awesome.
kind of another thing is we like to go see music and get out while we can.
I always
That's
love
wonderful.
young people like my nieces and stuff where, I'll be playing something on my guitar and they'll be like, how do you know Green Day? Like I grew up with them, like they're
Yes,
they're old, they're
yes,
older than me, I think.
yes. Or
And
the songs that are redone now, and you're like,
right,
oh yeah, you know
exactly.
that's not the original. Be like, what?
And it's crazy because I've done that, and then my dad will say, "Well, that's actually not the original. The
Yes,
original is blank, and it goes back to like
yes,
the 40s or whatever." And it's
yes.
just like, it's great. But I think
Yeah.
that that's awesome. There, you're bringing your kids out to so many different things, like and letting them experience books. You're letting them experience music, and everything that the 585 has to offer. It's so cool.
There's a
Yeah.
lot
It's
going on
interesting
here.
though. You mentioned that these cartoons and stuff, and I'm like,
Yeah,
my kids are so old now. Like, I don't know. Everyone talks about Bluey. I
yeah,
Oh,
know,
it's so
I
Bluey.
good.
know intellectually because I can see people talk about Bluey, and I've never actually seen a Bluey cartoon or like
Oh, you're
even
missing
the
out.
trolls. We're just so beyond that because my kids are, I almost hate to use the word, they're adults. My
Hmm.
kids are
But
adults.
as the parent of
Yeah.
Yeah,
two, you would enjoy Bluey.
you would.
It would take you back to those
Okay.
moments.
And it's got
That's what
It's
everyone
some
says. The
beautiful.
like,
mom is real, like
yeah.
Oh,
amazing.
she's great.
Oh yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah.
funny. It's funny. It's got adult, like it's one of those cartoons that has like adult themes in it with like the humor. Like you get it as a parent, you will appreciate it. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. They were This show brought to you by Bluey.
Yeah. What do you think? How can this is one of those, it's a big question, but I think you'll see where I'm going with a more concise answer. What do you think? how do I put this? How can a book change a child's life?
I think it's finding that one book that makes them a reader that is often the life-changing book for them, whether or not it's the actual characters or information or scenarios in that book, but whatever clicked or the format or whatever that makes kids say, I need to read more. Oh my gosh, this experience was so amazing. I need to read more. I need to read more. I need to read more. And then at schools, or when I'll go into different classes, we actually had McQuaid, a 7th grade from McQuaid here this week doing tours, and you look and you're like, okay, there's the music kids, maybe the arts kids, the sports kids, the gaming kids, and then there's the book kids. And I was always the book kid, like the library was my place, right? So you want there to be a place for everybody, and to understand that there are people driven towards different things. And I think for those book kids, finding that, like, maybe they don't fit in with any of those other things or other groups or other people, and then they read this book and then they're like, oh my gosh, this is my thing. And it gives them their, I don't want to say their purpose, that sounds way too big, but gives them like their anchor, like, okay, maybe the library is my place, maybe English class is my place, maybe the school library, maybe hanging out at Hippocampo Children's Books, maybe that is where I fit in, and those are my people.
Well, we're so glad that you chose our place and our space to share all these awesome things. And I urge our listeners to connect with Deena and kind of figure out everything she's doing. There's just so much there. But then also, like, public, service announcement for the 585 area, like, read a book, find your
Go to the
place,
library,
right?
read
Go
a
to the
book.
library. Yeah, you could visit her right in the library.
That's right.
Right.
Come on by.
Read her recommendations, and obviously I'm biased as the editor, but she's some of the cleanest copy I get. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful. Never any mistakes. Read Deena's book recommendations, because not only will you connect with a really great book, it's particularly for the 585 magazine, you're gonna connect with local authors, and there's just so many beautiful children's books out there that even if you don't think you don't read children's books anymore, go and read these reviews, because I am finding myself in these past several years picking up more and more middle grade and YA books, and letting go of the idea in my head that I'm too old, because this is dumb. You want to just enjoy life and learn. I've learned incredible things from young adult and children's books. So before we let you go soon, Deena, do you have a book that changed? Do you remember a book from your youth that was like, aha, like, this is the book that's making me a reader?
Wow. Man.
Well, while you're thinking about that, I'll give you a little bit of time to
gosh.
think here. Again, thank you for being on the show. And Christine, thank you for bringing this to our audience. I think this is awesome. It's just again, just like echoing what Christine said. And she's doing it too. She's gonna go watch a Bluey episode right after this. So she's taking advice here as well. She's gonna check out Bluey. And I love young adult books. I'm still a kid at heart, and I think we all, would love, books are an escape back to somewhere, or to some forward even to somewhere. So why not pick up a picture book and experience it? I mean, Carl, like the Rottweiler, right? Like there was no words, but such a great story.
Such a good
story.
Good dog, Carl.
I think what I'm recalling is how impactful it was. I want to say 2nd grade, Mrs. Van Horn reading Charlotte's Web aloud to our class, and James and the Giant Peach aloud to our class. I think it was 3rd grade, might have been Danny the Champion of the World. read to our class with the 2 hunting dogs.
Mhm.
And Hatchet, I think might have been 3rd grade, Mrs. Weigel. And those read alouds, I was just, I mean, captivated. And I know those experiences were gateways into my wanting to read. For my daughter last year, her teacher, Ms. Porta in 2nd grade, read the class The Wild Robot by Peter Brown, the first 2 books, which just came out as a movie. And, she immediately is like, we need to read the 3rd book. It's just coming out. So we did that as a read aloud. But the impact it had for the class to be experiencing the story together during the teacher read alouds, amazing. I love when teachers do that. I loved it then. It still has a great impact now. And these
Sure.
kids connect over these stories and characters that they're experiencing at the same time as each other.
So, Christine, you're gonna have to share yours now. But mine was My Side of the Mountain.
Oh, yep.
And I actually bought the book, the whole series actually, because I think it was a trilogy, it became a trilogy late on. And I've read them to almost all of it, 3 of them to my sons, and they both appreciate it, which it's hard to find twin boys, something like that are opposites, sort of something that connects them, and they both connected with that, which was kind of cool. So Christine, what's your life altering book?
Well,
Altering.
there's so many different ones, many different reasons, but to go very far back in time is to the book that I think made me a reader was the very first Boxcar Children.
Mhm.
It was the first book that I can remember reading, my first chapter book. I have a memory of being able to read it completely. And my mother also, her first book when she was a little girl in the 50s, that she was able to read cover to cover as a chapter book without any pictures, was the Boxcar Children. And so I would have to say I just want a little pink cup and live in a boxcar. And I can still visualize. I'm one of those people that has the inner monologue, some don't. I'm very visual in my memories, and I can still visualize the visualization I had of the characters and everything. And so there's so many. I can go on and on, but I'll just stop there. The Boxcar Children.
Yeah. We could talk to you forever about all this, and I know we're kind of at time, so I want to be respectful of your time, and thank you again for being on the show,
Thank
Deena,
you.
so much.
Yes, thank you guys. It was super fun. Yeah, anytime, books, writing, I'm here.
Go books, go library. Yay, saving the world.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of That Sounds Terrific in the 585. Check out our website, www.thatsoundsterrific.com, to see a full list of episodes and learn more about our hosts, Nick Koziel and Christine Green. Be sure